Isabelle Boner commanded respect in Hollywood's theatre circuit through the early 1950s, earning acclaim for her intense dramatic portrayals and commitment to her craft. Her reputation for mastering complex characters made her a natural choice for leading roles in psychological dramas. The Callas Circle Theatre in Los Angeles became her regular performing ground, where sophisticated audiences came to witness her transformative performances night after night. On February 2, 1955, the theatre was packed for another performance of The Shrike, a psychological drama that had been drawing critical acclaim. Boner's role demanded an emotionally charged delivery, something she had mastered over her years on stage. The first act proceeded normally, with Boner delivering her lines with characteristic precision and emotional depth. As the second act began, Boner seemed particularly invested in her performance. Her delivery was more intense than usual, causing several audience members to comment on her exceptional emotional range that evening. The tension in the theatre built as she approached one of the play's most dramatic sequences. Suddenly, mid-dialogue, something changed in her demeanor. Without warning, Boner clutched at her chest, her face contorting in what appeared to be part of her character's emotional breakdown. The audience, completely engrossed in her performance, watched intently as she staggered slightly. Many later recalled thinking it was the most convincing piece of method acting they had ever witnessed. Some even began to applaud what they believed was a masterful portrayal of physical and emotional anguish. The applause quickly died down as Boner collapsed on stage. For several long moments, the audience sat in an appreciative silence, expecting her to rise and continue the scene. The other actors on stage, initially frozen in their positions, began to realize something was terribly wrong. When Boner remained motionless, her fellow cast members broke character and rushed to her side. The theater's house lights suddenly came up, breaking the theatrical illusion. A doctor in the audience rushed forward as stagehands quickly lowered the curtain. The audience sat in stunned silence as an announcement was made, requesting calm and asking if there was any medical professional present. The truth became devastatingly clear. Isabelle Boner had suffered a massive heart attack on stage in the middle of her performance. The cruel irony wasn't lost on those present. A consummate professional known for her ability to portray intense emotional scenes had died during one of the most powerful performances. The audience had witnessed not just the end of a play, but the final moments of an actress who dedicated her life to the craft. The Callas Circle Theatre, usually filled with applause at this hour, instead fell silent in tragic tribute to an artist who gave her final performance in the most literal sense. Edith Webster's name became forever linked to one of theater's most chilling coincidences in Baltimore. A fixture in the local theater scene since the 1930s, Webster had carved out a special place in the hearts of Maryland theater-goers through her compelling performances and unwavering dedication to acting. By 1986, she had become particularly well known for her recurring role in The Drunkard, a melodrama that had evolved into a beloved tradition in the Baltimore community. The play itself was a morality tale, performed with theatrical flourishes typical of Victorian-era melodrama. Webster's character met a dramatic end in the third act, a scene which she had perfected over countless performances. Her death scene had become something of a highlight, with regular audience members anticipating her passionate delivery of her character's final moments. She would collapse dramatically, utter her final lines, and lay still until the curtain call, when she would invariably rise to enthusiastic applause. On November 24, 1986, the Towson Moose Lodge was filled with its usual mix of theater enthusiasts and regular patrons. Webster arrived early, as was her custom, to prepare for her role. Colleagues later recalled that she seemed in particularly good spirits that evening, joking with cast members and greeting regular audience members as they arrived. The first two acts proceeded normally, with Webster delivering her usual strong performance. As the third act began, the audience settled in for what they knew would be Webster's dramatic death scene. The moment approached, and Webster began her character's final monologue. She delivered her signature line with characteristic passion, "Mother, dear mother, I'm dying." Then, right on cue, she collapsed on the stage floor. The audience, having seen this scene many times before, responded with appreciative applause for what they believed was another masterful performance. The applause continued as the scene progressed, but something was different. Webster remained completely still, showing none of the subtle signs of life that experienced theatergoers had come to notice during her performances. Her fellow actors, initially continuing with their lines, began to sense that something was amiss. The stage manager, watching from the wings, noticed that Webster's collapse had seemed slightly different from her usual choreographed fall. As the moment stretched on, concern began to spread through the cast. The stage manager dispatched someone to check on Webster, trying to do so discreetly to avoid alarming the audience. When the cast member reached her, it became immediately apparent that this was no performance. Webster had suffered a massive heart attack during her scripted death scene. Her real final moments perfectly synchronized with her character's scripted demise. The cruel synchronicity of the moment, a veteran actress dying while performing a death scene she had enacted hundreds of times before, created a surreal atmosphere in the theater. The audience, still unaware of the tragedy unfolding before them, continued to watch expectantly, waiting for the scene's resolution. Instead, the house lights came up, and a somber announcement was made that the performance would not continue. Jane Little's remarkable 7-decade career with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra culminated in a finale that seemed almost scripted in its poetic timing. The world's longest-serving orchestra musician, Little had dedicated 71 years to music, becoming a living legend in the classical music world. Her mastery of the double bass, an instrument nearly twice her size, had earned her admiration from musicians and audiences alike. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra had become more than just a workplace for Little. It was her second home. Through countless performances, rehearsals, and tours, she had maintained her position with grace and skill, even as younger musicians came and went. Her dedication to music remained unwavering, and at 87, she continued to perform with the same passion that had marked her early career. On May 15, 2016, the Symphony Hall in Atlanta was filled with the usual mix of classical music enthusiasts and casual concertgoers. The program that day featured popular Broadway tunes, a departure from the orchestra's usual classical repertoire. Little took her familiar place in the bass section, her presence as commanding as ever, despite her petite frame. The concert progressed smoothly through its program, with Little performing each piece with her characteristic precision. As the orchestra began playing "There's No Business Like Show Business," the energy in the hall was palpable. The upbeat Irving Berlin classic had always been a crowd favorite, its theatrical spirit perfectly suited for a pops concert. During the performance, Little maintained her usual focused expression, her fingers dancing across the strings of her beloved bass. The piece was building to its climactic finale when something unexpected happened. Without any warning, Little suddenly swayed slightly, her bow briefly faltering. Before her colleagues could react, she collapsed on the stage, her bass falling silent mid-phrase. The orchestra continued playing for a few moments, as is customary when minor disruptions occur during a performance. However, it quickly became apparent that this was no minor incident. The conductor, noticing the commotion in the bass section, brought the piece to a halt. The music died away, replaced by the murmur of concerned voices and the rustle of movement as medical personnel rushed to Little's aid. In a twist of fate that seemed almost too perfectly scripted, Little had quite literally died doing what she loved most. The choice of her final piece, "There's No Business Like Show Business," added an almost surreal layer of poignancy to the moment. She had spent her entire adult life in show business, dedicating herself to the craft of orchestral performance with a devotion few could match. The symbolism of her final performance wasn't lost on her colleagues or the audience. Little had often joked about never retiring, saying she would play until she couldn't anymore. In the end, that's exactly what she did, maintaining her position as the world's longest-serving orchestra musician until her very last breath. Maria Callas's final appearance before an audience proved to be a haunting prelude to her tragic end. The woman known worldwide as La Divina for her extraordinary voice and dramatic presence had already achieved legendary status in the opera world. Her performances were known for their intensity and emotional depth, with audiences and critics alike praising her ability to inhabit every role she undertook. The year was 1974, and Callas had already begun to experience the vocal difficulties that would plague her later years. Despite these challenges, she agreed to perform a series of recitals, determined to maintain her presence in the opera world. Her reputation still drew massive crowds, with audiences eager to witness what many suspected might be among her final performances. During one of these recitals, the pressure of maintaining her legendary status despite her declining abilities became devastatingly apparent. As she performed, those in attendance noticed something different about her usually commanding presence. Her voice, once capable of effortlessly filling the largest opera houses, seemed to strain. The performance took an alarming turn when Callas suddenly showed signs of distress. Her breathing, typically precisely controlled through years of classical training, became labored. The audience, accustomed to seeing her complete control over every aspect of her performance, watched in growing concern as she struggled to maintain her composure. Without warning, Callas collapsed on stage. The incident shocked the audience, who had come expecting to witness the usual magnificence of a Callas performance. Instead, they became unwitting witnesses to the beginning of the end for one of opera's greatest voices. The memory of that final public appearance haunted those who had witnessed it, as they realized that they had seen the moment when La Divina became all too human. Emma Livry's tragic end in 1863 stunned the Paris Opera Ballet and revolutionized theatre safety standards across Europe. At just 21 years old, this promising ballerina had already captured the hearts of French audiences with her ethereal style and technical precision. Critics hailed her as the natural successor to the Romantic ballet tradition, praising her ability to seem almost weightless on stage. The events of November 15, 1862, began like any other rehearsal at the Paris Opera. Livry was preparing for her role in La Muette de Portici, a challenging production that would showcase her remarkable talents. The rehearsal space was lit by gas lights, a modern innovation at the time that had replaced the traditional oil lamps in most major theaters. Livry's costume that day was typical of the era's ballet attire, a white tulle skirt treated with chemicals to create the ghostly, floating effect the audiences adored. These treatments made the fabric highly flammable, a danger that was well known but generally ignored in pursuit of theatrical perfection. The combination of treated costumes and the gaslights had already caused several minor incidents in theaters across Europe. During a particularly complex sequence, Livry's skirt brushed against one of the gaslights. In an instant, the treated tulle ignited and flames engulfed her costume. The fire spread with horrifying speed, the chemicals in the fabric accelerating the blaze. Witnesses described a terrifying scene as Livry, panicked and in pain, ran across the stage, the flames growing more intense with each movement. A stagehand finally managed to reach her with a blanket, but by then, the damage was catastrophic. The burns covered much of her body, and her injuries were severe. Despite immediate medical attention, the prognosis was grim. The following 8 months became a testament to both human resilience and unimaginable suffering. Even though she didn't die on stage, the injuries from her performance would later be the cause of her demise. Livry endured excruciating pain throughout her treatment, refusing morphine in accordance with her religious beliefs. She remained conscious and lucid through much of her ordeal, even receiving visitors who came to offer support and prayer. The ballet world held its breath, hoping for a miracle recovery that would return their rising star to the stage. On July 26, 1863, after 8 months of agony, Emma Livry finally succumbed to her injuries. Her death sparked immediate calls for reform in theatre safety practices. The incident forced the Paris Opera and other major theatres to reconsider their use of gas lighting and chemically treated costumes. New regulations were implemented, and alternative materials were sought for creating the ethereal effects that audiences demanded.